Nobody leaves here hungry. Not on my watch. She said it. Then she tore the check in half. $82 gone. Just like that. Evelyn Harris had $17 in her banking account, a past-due electric bill under the fruit bowl, and a son at home who needed new shoes. She knew exactly what she was giving away. She did it anyway. No speech, no hesitation. She set the torn pieces on the table and walked back behind the counter before any of those 6 broken bikers could say a word. She had no idea that in 12 hours, 650 Hells Angels would know her name. If this story moves you, hit subscribe right now and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The morning started the way most mornings did for Evelyn Harris. Bad coffee, aching feet, and a pit in her stomach that never quite went away. She had been on shift since 5. The diner was quiet the way it always was before the highway trucks started rolling through, and she was wiping down the counter for the 3rd time, not because it was dirty, but because her hands needed something to do when her mind started going places she didn't want it to go. She was thinking about the electric bill. Again, $63 past due. She'd gotten the notice 3 days ago and tucked it under the fruit bowl on the counter at home, like maybe if she stopped looking at it, the number would somehow change. It hadn't, and now it sat in the back of her skull every single quiet moment she had ticking like a clock. Ev, that was Darlene, the other waitress on shift, poking her head out from the back. You good? Fine, Evelyn said, which was the word she used when she was anything but. Darlene gave her that look, the one that said she didn't believe her, but wasn't going to push, and disappeared back behind the swinging door. Evelyn went back to wiping. She was 54 years old and she had worked at the Mesa Grill for 11 years. Before that, a grocery store. Before that, a hospital laundry room. Before her husband Marcus died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 61 days from diagnosis to funeral, she had at least had his income to balance against the fear. Now it was just her son, Noah, and a checking account that she was terrified to look at directly the way you couldn't look at the sun. Noah was 16, smart kid, the kind of smart that made teachers stop mid-sentence and look at him twice. He was reading college-level books at 13, and last year his history teacher had pulled Evelyn aside after a parent-teacher night and told her, Mom, Mrs. Harris, your son is exceptional. Please don't let circumstance take that from him. She had cried in the parking lot for 20 minutes after that. Not from sadness, from the weight of it, the responsibility, the gap between what her boy deserved and what she could give him. She was still thinking about that when the door opened. She heard them before she saw them, the creak of leather, the heavy fall of boots on tile, and the low murmur of men who weren't talking so much as trying not to talk. She turned from the counter. 6 men. Big men, every one of them wearing the same cut black leather vest patches sewn on like a language she didn't speak. Their faces were road-worn red from wind, unshaven and hollow-eyed. They moved like men who had been sitting on motorcycles for too many hours and hadn't slept. And there was something else, something underneath the exhaustion, a grief so heavy you could feel it coming off them, the way heat comes off asphalt. Evelyn had waited tables long enough to know grief. She'd served it 100 times. It sat different than hunger, different than tiredness. It had a specific weight. Sit anywhere you like, she said. They took the big corner booth. All 6 of them crammed in, barely speaking. One of them, the youngest, she thought early 30s, dark stubble, a scar on his chin, pressed his knuckles to his mouth like he was holding something back. She brought menus. None of them looked at her. Take your time, she said quietly. 5 minutes passed. She refilled the coffee urn, checked on a trucker at table 3 who needed a pie slice and came back. You boys ready? The one who seemed oldest gray at his temples, a deep horizontal scar along his jaw, that had seen serious things, looked up at her. His name tag on the vest said nothing, but his eyes said everything. Yeah, he said, we're ready. They ordered big, the grief-hungry always do, eggs, stacks of pancakes, bacon, toast, orange juice. 2 orders of hash browns, for the table more coffee. The young one with the scar on his chin asked for extra syrup, and his voice cracked when he said it, and the man next to him put a hand briefly on his shoulder and then took it away. Evelyn wrote it all down and went to the window. Full table in the corner, she told Mike the cook. Hell's Angels, Mike said, squinting out the pass-through. Don't stare, Evelyn said. I'm not staring. I'm staring. You want me to call Garrett? Garrett was the manager. He was not in Evelyn's experience a person who made any situation better. For what she said, they ordered breakfast. Mike, just cook it. He gave her a look. She gave one back. He started cracking eggs. The food went out in 2 trips. The men ate in near silence. Not rude silence, something more like sacred silence. The way people get quiet at funerals, not because they're told to, but because the weight of the moment demands it. Evelyn stayed at a respectful distance, refilling coffee when cups got low, not asking questions, not making small talk. She knew when to leave people alone. She was clearing table 3 when she overheard it. Not clearly, just fragments, but enough. Should have been there, that's all I'm saying. Wasn't your fault. Bare none of it was. Ray would have laughed at us sitting here like this. Ray. She filed it away and kept moving. At the 40-minute mark, the older man with gray temples caught her eye and nodded. She brought the check, $82.15. She set it face down on the table the way she always did and went to refill the corner coffee station. She heard the conversation shift. Quieter, lower, the specific register of men who are embarrassed and trying not to show it. She looked over her shoulder just once, and saw 3 of them reaching into jacket pockets turning out contents. Crumpled bills, loose change. One of them, a heavy-set man with a thick beard, slowly turned his wallet inside out on the table like he was hoping something would materialize. Evelyn turned back to the coffee station. She stood there for a long moment. The electric bill, the rent, the $17 in her checking account. She knew the exact number because she checked it at midnight when she couldn't sleep, lying in bed running arithmetic in her head like a prayer. $17.40. She'd counted the change. She thought about what Garrett would say. She knew what Garrett would say. She had worked for him for 11 years and she knew exactly the shape of his expressions, the particular pleasure he took in reminding her how replaceable she was. She thought about Noah. His face in the morning, still half asleep, eating cereal and reading whatever book he'd started the night before. The way he'd started making his own lunches to save her the trouble and thought she hadn't noticed. She thought about her grandmother Ida Mae Harris, who had lived in a 4-room house in Georgia and who had never in her life had money, but who had fed neighbors, fed strangers, fed anyone who knocked. Who had told Evelyn the last summer before she passed, "Baby, the ones who need it most are the ones too proud to ask. You watch for them, and you help them anyway." Evelyn picked up her order pad. She walked back to the corner booth. The gray-templed man looked up at her, and she could see it in his face, the set jaw, the readiness to be humiliated, the slow acceptance of what was coming. He was preparing himself. Men like that, she'd learned, prepared themselves for shame the same way they prepared for a fight. They tensed, they went still. They waited. He started to say something. She didn't let him. She picked up the check from the table. She looked at it, 8/2/15. Her own handwriting neat and small because she'd been trained to write small to fit the pad. She looked at it for exactly 1 second, and she tore it in half, then in quarters. She set the pieces on the table. "Nobody leaves here hungry," she said. "Not on my watch." The booth went completely silent. The young one with the scar on his chin stared at her. The heavy-set man stopped moving. 2 of the others exchanged a look that she couldn't read. The gray-templed man looked at her for a long moment. Not the way men usually looked at her, through her, past her, like she was part of the furniture. He looked at her like she was a real person, like he was actually seeing her. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice was rough in a way that had nothing to do with the road. "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't," Evelyn said. "That's kind of the whole point." Another silence. Then the young one with the chin scar said very quietly, "Thank you." 2 words, but the way he said them. Evelyn nodded once, tucked her pad under her arm, and walked back behind the counter. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the counter surface, and took a slow breath. She had exactly 0 idea what had just come over her. She had $17.40. She had a past-due electric bill. She had a son who needed new school shoes and a car that made a noise it hadn't made a month ago. And she had just eaten $82. She heard the boots on the tile, the creak of leather, the door opened, and then the door closed, and they were gone. She stood there for a moment, then she started clearing the table. That's when Garrett came out of the back. She hadn't even heard him arrive. But there he was standing at the edge of the dining room with his arms crossed and his particular expression, the flat, satisfied look of a man who has caught someone doing something he can use. "Evelyn," he said, "my office. I'm in the middle of clearing a table." "Now, guy." She set down the plates. She followed him. His office was a glorified closet. A desk, a filing cabinet, a framed photo of him shaking hands with someone she didn't recognize, and a smell of old coffee and synthetic air freshener that she had grown to genuinely despise over 11 years. He sat. She stood. "You want to tell me what just happened out there?" "I comped a table." "You comped an $82 table without authorization?" "Yes." He spread his hands like she'd just proven his point for him. "You don't have that authority, Evelyn. You know that. You've known that for 11 years. You cannot make financial decisions for this establishment on your own." "They didn't have money," she said. "They were grieving." "Everyone who doesn't want to pay their bill has a story." "These men lost someone." Garrett leaned back in his chair. He did that thing he did when he was about to say something he'd already decided to say, a small pause, a slight tilt of the head, a performance of consideration. "I'm going to have to dock your pay. The 82 comes out of your next check." There it was. Evelyn's next check was $174. With the deduction, she would take home 92. She did the math without meaning to, instantly the way she always did math, now reflexively the way other people blink. 92 minus 63 for the electric bill, $29, minus gas for the car, minus whatever Noah needed for school next week. "You understand," Garrett said. "I understand," she said. "Good. Get back out there." She walked out. She went back to the dining room. She picked up the plates from the corner booth and carried them to the back. Darlene was in the kitchen doorway watching her. "He dock you?" Darlene asked. "Yeah." "Ev." "Don't," Evelyn said, not harshly, but firmly. "I made a choice. I'll live with it." Darlene shook her head slowly. "You're a better person than I am." "I don't know about that," Evelyn said. "I'm just the person I know how to be." She went back to work. The morning shift passed slowly. The lunch rush came and went, 2 families, a group of highway workers, a couple of truckers. Evelyn worked through it, keeping her face neutral, keeping her hands busy. She got a text at 12:47 from a number she recognized but didn't want to see, the property management company. Rent was 9 days overdue. They were following up. "Please contact the office." She put her phone in her apron pocket. At 1:15, she got another text. Her phone company, a data overage charge, $14. She stood in the back hallway with both texts sitting open on her screen, and she stared at the ceiling, and she did not cry. She had made a decision not to cry at work anymore. She'd made that decision the week after Marcus died, when she came in for a shift, because she needed the money, and she'd cried in the walk-in freezer for 7 minutes, and it hadn't changed a single thing, and she'd come out with red eyes, and Garrett had looked at her like she was an inconvenience. Crying didn't change math. She put her phone away and went back to work. The afternoon was quiet, midweek slow. Evelyn refilled salt shakers, restocked napkin holders, wiped tables. The diner hummed and ticked around her. The highway outside was steady with the low roar of trucks. She thought about the gray-templed man, about the young one who had said thank you in that broken way, about whoever had made them all look like that. Ray, she thought. Someone named Ray. She thought about her own grief, about Marcus, about the specific way his laugh had sounded, and how she still sometimes reached for him in the middle of the night and came up empty, and had to remind herself every time that the emptiness was permanent now. Grief was grief, she'd decided. It didn't matter what jacket you were wearing. She was wiping down the counter at 3 when her phone buzzed again. She almost didn't look. But she did. It was an unknown number. Arizona area code, but not one she recognized. The message was 3 words. "We don't forget." Evelyn stared at the screen. She read it again. Her first thought was wrong number. Her second thought, half a beat later, was different. She looked at the timestamp. 3:06, less than 10 hours after she'd torn up that check. She stood very still. "Everything okay?" Mike called through the pass-through. "Yeah," she said. "Yeah, fine." She set the phone face down on the counter. She picked up her rag. She kept moving because that was the only thing she knew how to do. Keep moving, Keep working, keep getting through the day, 1 hour at a time. But the words sat in her chest. We don't forget. She told herself it was nothing. People sent texts to wrong numbers all the time. She finished her shift, hung up her apron, signed out, and drove home through the orange-washed Arizona evening. Noah was at the kitchen table doing homework. He looked up when she came in. He had his father's eyes, brown and steady, and very hard to lie to. "How was work?" he asked. "Fine," she said. He went back to his homework. She went to the kitchen and started on dinner. But her hands, she noticed, had not quite stopped shaking. And 300 miles away, in a parking lot off I-10, a man with gray temples was making a phone call. And the wheels that Evelyn Harris had unknowingly set in motion were already turning. She slept badly that night. Not the kind of bad sleep where you toss and turn and eventually drift off. The kind where you lie completely still, staring at the ceiling, and your brain refuses to stop running numbers. $92, $63 for the electric, $29 left. Gehin. Noah's shoes. The grinding noise in the car that she'd been ignoring for 3 weeks because ignoring it was free and fixing it was not. And underneath all of that, like a current she couldn't quite locate. We don't forget. She checked the number twice before bed. No name attached. No prior messages. She'd almost texted back and then stopped herself, thumb hovering because she didn't know what she would say, and she didn't know what she was hoping to hear. She put the phone on the nightstand and told herself to sleep. She didn't sleep. At 6:15, her alarm went off, and she was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed in the gray morning light, already calculating what the day was going to cost her. Noah was up before her, which surprised her. He was in the kitchen, already dressed, pouring cereal. He looked up when she came in. "You look terrible," he said. "Thank you, Noah." "I mean it as a medical observation. I didn't sleep well." He pushed the cereal box toward her. She sat down across from him and poured herself a bowl. She wasn't sure she was hungry enough to eat. "Something happened at work?" he asked. She looked at him. 16 years old, with Marcus's eyes and her mother's awe and a way of paying attention that sometimes made her feel like she was talking to a much older person. "I comped a table," she said. "Big one." "How big?" $82. He was quiet for a moment, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Garrett, no," Garrett found out. "He dock you?" "Yeah." Noah set his spoon down. He looked at the table. She could see him doing what she'd been doing all night, the math running automatically the way it did when money was always tight enough that arithmetic became a survival skill. "Mom," he said. "Don't," she said. Same words she'd used with Darlene. Same tone. "I'm not saying you were wrong," he said quickly. "I'm not saying that. He stopped, picked up his spoon again. "Were they worth it?" She thought about the gray-templed man's face when she'd torn the check. The way he'd looked at her like she was a real person. "Yeah," she said. "They were worth it." Noah nodded slowly. He didn't say anything else. He finished his cereal, rinsed his bowl, picked up his backpack, and paused at the door. "Grandma Ida would have done the same thing," he said, and then he was gone. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table for a long moment. She pressed her hands flat on the surface. She breathed. Then she got up, got dressed, and went to work. The morning shift was quiet again. Darlene was already there when she arrived, and the look Darlene gave her when she walked in was careful and measured the look of someone who has been thinking about what to say and still isn't sure. "Sleep okay?" Darlene asked. "Fine," Evelyn said. Darlene clearly didn't believe her, but she let it go. They worked in the familiar rhythm of early morning coffee, brewing booths, wiped down the quiet domestic machinery of a diner before the customers arrive. It was the part of the day Evelyn usually liked best. The calm before the noise. But today the calm felt different. Pressed in. Thin. At 8:20 Garrett arrived. He didn't come in through the front. He came in through the back the way he always did, and she heard his voice before she saw him, that particular self-important clip, the way he talked to Mike about the walk-in inventory, like every word was a proclamation. She kept her back to the kitchen door and focused on her tables. He came out at 8:35, walked the floor, stopped at the counter. "Harris," he said. "Garrett, you understand yesterday is logged. You told me it was logged. Just making sure we're clear." "We're clear," she said. She did not look at him. She kept wiping the counter. He stood there for a moment longer than was necessary. She could feel it, the specific pleasure that certain people took in having leverage. The way they liked to let you feel the weight of it, even after they'd already used it. These kinds of decisions add up, he said. You understand what I mean. She put the cloth down and looked at him then, directly. I understand exactly what you mean, Garrett. Something shifted in his face. Maybe he'd expected her to look away. She didn't. He walked back toward the office. Darlene appeared at her elbow like she'd materialized from thin air. One day, Darlene said under her breath, someone is going to put that man in his place. Probably not today, Evelyn said. She picked up the cloth and kept wiping. The morning passed, 9 o'clock became 10, tables turned over, coffee got refilled. Evelyn moved through the diner on automatic pilot, her body doing what it had done for 11 years, while her mind ran quiet and careful in the background. She was taking an order at table 6, 2 women, late 60s, splitting a waffle when her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She ignored it, finished the order, walked to the window, passed it to Mike. Then she stepped into the back hallway and pulled out her phone. Unknown number again. Same area code as last time. She opened the message. How are you doing this morning, ma'am? She stood very still. She read it twice. 3 times, her thumb moved before she fully decided to let it. Who is this? She typed back. 20 seconds passed. She counted them. Someone who owes you a debt. Her heart rate did something it hadn't done in a while. Not fear exactly, something adjacent to it. You don't owe me anything, she typed. It was just breakfast. The response came faster this time. It was never just breakfast. She stared at the screen. Mike called her name through the pass-through table 4 needed a refill. She shoved the phone back in her pocket and walked out. But her hands were doing that thing again. The 2 women at table 6 left a $4 tip on an $18 check, which was standard, and a trucker at table 2 left nothing, which was also standard, and Evelyn did the math. She always did every shift, every tip running the total in the back of her mind, the way some people ran background music. She was 68 cents from making her gas money when Darlene leaned across the counter at 11:45 and said in a very specific, quiet voice, "Abe outside." Evelyn looked up. Darlene's face was doing something she couldn't quite read. What? There's a guy outside, in the parking lot. He's been sitting on a motorcycle for about 20 minutes and he keeps looking at the front window. The back of Evelyn's neck went cold. Big guy, she asked. Gray at the temples, Darlene blinked. You know him? No, Evelyn said. I don't know him. But she walked to the front window. She moved carefully, not obviously the way you move when you don't want to be seen looking. She positioned herself behind the coffee station and looked out at the parking lot. He was there, the gray-templed man from yesterday. Same cut, same road-worn face, same way of sitting completely still that she associated with people who had spent a long time in circumstances where stillness was a survival strategy. He wasn't looking at his phone, he wasn't eating or drinking anything. He was just sitting on his motorcycle, arms folded, facing the diner, looking for her. Call someone, Darlene said quietly. She'd come up behind Evelyn. No, Evelyn said. Her voice was steady, which surprised her. I'm going to go talk to him. Evelyn, it'll be fine. She didn't know if that was true, but she walked to the front door and she pushed it open and she walked out into the Arizona morning heat. He saw her immediately. He unfolded his arms. His face was neutral, not threatening, but not warm either. The face of a man who didn't perform expressions for other people's comfort. She stopped a few feet in front of him. You've been out here a while, she said. Did not want to come in without being invited, he said, after yesterday. She looked at him carefully. In the full daylight, outside the context of the booth and the grief, she could see things she hadn't noticed. A tiredness that went past road miles. And something else, a kind of unresolved weight, the look of a man carrying something he hadn't put down yet. Was it you who texted me? She asked. It was. How'd you get my number? Your coworker wrote it on the bag when we ordered takeout last spring. Different waitress gave us the order, said to text if there was a problem. He paused. I kept it. That was specific enough to be true. What do you want? She asked. He was quiet for a moment, not evasive, careful, like he was choosing words. I want to explain something to you, Chastain, he said, about yesterday, about why it matters. It was breakfast, she said. I already told you. It wasn't to us, he said, simply, no drama in it, just the flat, dry weight of a fact. She looked at him, he looked back at her, and there was that thing again, the quality of really being seen, the thing she hadn't felt from a stranger in longer than she could remember. "One of the men with you," she said. "Someone named Ray." Something moved across his face. Fast, there and gone. "You heard that," he said. "Not much, just the name." He nodded once slowly. "Ray Dalton," he said. "He was our brother, not by blood. But that doesn't matter, you know what I mean by brother." "I know what you mean," she said quietly. "He died 4 days ago. The 6 of us rode through the night to get to the service in Tucson. We didn't stop. We didn't plan for much. He stopped. He pressed his jaw for a moment. We were not in a state to be planning things." "I know what grief does to planning," Evelyn said. He looked at her. "Yeah," he said, "I think you do." A beat of silence fell between them. Not uncomfortable, the specific silence of two people who have recognized something in each other. "My name is Kel," he said. "Kel Monroe." "Evelyn Harris." "I know," he said. "Darlene has a name tag." Something almost like a smile crossed her face. "Almost." "So you came back to say thank you," she said. "You could have texted that." "I came back," Kel Monroe said carefully, "to tell you that what you did is going to be answered. Our way. I wanted you to hear it from me directly so that when it happens, you are not afraid." Her stomach dropped 2 inches. "What does that mean?" "When what happens?" "I made some calls last night," he said. "You fed 6 brothers at the lowest point any of them had been in years. In our world, that's not nothing. That's not something you let go unanswered. You don't owe me. We decide what we owe," he said, not harshly, but with the kind of finality that meant the sentence was over. "That's how it works with us. You'll understand when the time comes." She stared at him. "Kel, I need you to be clearer than that." He met her eyes. "It will be good," he said. "I promise you that on Ray's name, it will be nothing but good." She didn't know what to say to that. She stood in the heat of the parking lot looking at a man she didn't know who had just made her a promise she didn't understand in the name of a man she'd never met. "Okay," she said finally, because what else was there? He nodded. He started the motorcycle. He looked at her one more time, that direct, unflinching look. "Thank you, Evelyn Harris," he said, and he rode away. She stood in the parking lot for a full minute after the engine sound faded. Then she went back inside. Darlene was at the counter with both eyebrows raised so high they were nearly in her hairline. "Well, he came to say thank you," Evelyn said. "That's it." "That's it," Evelyn said, which was almost true. She went back to work. She refilled coffee. She took orders. She moved through the rest of the morning shift on the surface of herself, while underneath in the quiet processing part of her brain, she turned over what Kel Monroe had said and couldn't find the edges of it. "It will be good. I promise you that on Ray's name." By 2 o'clock, she'd mostly convinced herself it was nothing. A gesture. A man's way of making himself feel better about a debt he felt he owed. He'd said his piece, he'd ridden away, and that was the end of it. By 3 o'clock, she was less convinced. By the time her shift ended at 4:30, and she was walking to her car in the parking lot, her phone buzzing with a text from the property management company, and a notification that her data was nearly capped for the month, she had almost stopped thinking about it entirely. Almost. She drove home, made dinner, listened to Noah talk about a history project he was working on, something about the labor movement in the 1930s, that she only half followed because she kept losing the thread, kept drifting back to the parking lot, to Kel Monroe's face, to the words that sat in her chest like something she hadn't fully swallowed. After dinner, she sat at the kitchen table with the bills spread out in front of her. Electric, rent, car payment. She had a yellow legal pad where she wrote the numbers out by hand because for some reason seeing them on paper made them feel more manageable than seeing them on a screen. More like a problem she could solve and less like a hole she was standing in. She wrote out the numbers. She looked at them. The hole was deep. "Mom," Noah said from the doorway. She looked up. He was holding his phone out to her. His face was doing something she couldn't quite read. "Look at this," he said. She took the phone. It was a Facebook post, a page she didn't recognize with thousands of followers posted 3 hours ago. The caption was simple. "A waitress in Arizona showed 6 of our brothers kindness at the hardest moment they'd known. If you know her, you know what she did. If you know us, you know what comes next." It had been shared 11,000 times. Evelyn looked at the number. She looked at Noah. She looked back at the number. Mom, Noah said. His voice was very careful. Who did you feed yesterday? She set the phone down on the legal pad right on top of the column of numbers. 6 men, she said, just 6 men. But 11,000 shares said something different. And 70 miles away from her kitchen table in the rest stop off the interstate, a convoy that had started with 6 motorcycles had grown to 43. Men, the way it worked when something moved through the network fast and certain and unstoppable as a current. Helmets going on, engines turning over. A direction agreed upon. And in a truck stop bathroom, Kel Monroe splashed water on his face and looked at himself in the mirror and thought about Ray Dalton, who had been the most generous man he'd ever known, who had stopped for strangers on roadsides and bought coffee for people in line behind him, and once famously given a scared kid on the side of Route 66 the shirt off his back because the kid was cold, and Ray didn't believe in keeping what someone else needed more. This one's for you, brother, Kel said quietly to the mirror. He dried his hands. He walked out to his bike. He rode. Evelyn didn't sleep that night either. She sat at the kitchen table until almost midnight, Noah's phone on the legal pad in front of her, watching the share count, climbed the way you watch a storm roll in, knowing it's coming, unable to do anything about it, unable to look away. 11,000 had become 16,000 by 9 o'clock. By 10:30, it was pushing 22. She had read the post 4 times. She had not shared it. She had not commented on it. She did not know what she would say if she did. Noah had stayed up with her for a while, sitting across the table, the two of them in the quiet of the kitchen that felt less quiet than usual. At 10 o'clock, he'd reached across and touched her hand briefly, a gesture so much like his father's that it stopped her breath for a second and said, "It's going to be okay, Mom, whatever this is." "Go to bed," she'd told him. "You sure?" "I'm sure." He'd gone. She'd stayed. At 11:50, she turned off the kitchen light, set Noah's phone on the counter, and went to bed. She lay in the dark and told herself all the reasonable things. It was a Facebook post. Social media was noise. This would be a 24-hour thing. People would share it and feel good about themselves and move on. And by Friday, nobody would remember a waitress in Arizona who'd torn up an $82 check. That was the reasonable thing, the logical thing. She almost believed it. Her alarm went off at 5:15. She was once again already awake. She had a text from a number she didn't know, not the same one as before, a different one. She almost didn't open it. Then she did. "Ma'am, my name is Carla Torres. I'm a journalist with the Arizona Daily Independent. I was hoping to speak with you about an incident at the Mesa Grill on Tuesday morning. Please call me at your earliest convenience." Evelyn put the phone face down on the nightstand. She stared at the ceiling. "No," she said out loud to no one. She got up, she got dressed, she made coffee, she poured it, stood at the kitchen counter, and drank it, looking out the window at the pre-dawn street where nothing was moving yet, and everything was still the specific blue-gray of a world that hadn't decided to be a day yet. Her phone buzzed again. Carla Torres, a follow-up text. "I completely understand if you'd prefer privacy. I just wanted you to know the story is already out there. I'd rather you have a voice in it." Evelyn set the phone down again. Then she picked it up again and called Kel Monroe's number. It rang twice. "Evelyn," he answered. He sounded awake. She had a feeling he was always awake. "There's a journalist texting me," she said. A pause. "I know, I'm sorry about that. We tried to keep the post vague." 22,000 shares isn't vague, Kel." "No," he said. "It's not. I underestimated the reach." "That's on me." She pressed her back against the counter. "I don't want to be a story," she said. "I didn't do what I did to be a story. I did it because it was the right thing, and my grandmother raised me a certain way, and that's the whole of it." "I know that," he said. "Then why?" "Because the people who needed to know found out," he said. "And now something's in motion that I can't stop, and honestly wouldn't stop even if I could." "Evelyn." His voice shifted, became more direct, more careful. "What's coming? It's going to be a lot. I need you to be ready for that." Her stomach dropped again. That same 2-inch drop from the day before in the parking lot, except this time it was deeper. "Kel, I need you to tell me right now what you mean by a lot." He was quiet for 3 full seconds. "How many of us do you think there are?" he said. She didn't answer. I made 6 phone calls Tuesday night, he said. Those 6 people made calls. Those calls made calls. By Wednesday afternoon, we had a number. He paused. We're coming to you, Evelyn. Not to the diner, to you, to your home. Because Ray would have wanted it done right, and right means we come to you personally. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. How many Kel must... Last count, he said, 651. The kitchen was completely silent. 651. That number's probably moved since I last checked, he said. She set her coffee cup down because she didn't trust her hand. When she whispered, tomorrow morning, he said, before sunrise. She stood in her kitchen in the dark and she couldn't speak. Couldn't move, couldn't find a single word in any language that was big enough for what she was feeling, which was not one thing but about 15 things simultaneously, and chief among them, right at the top, was something very close to terror. I have neighbors, she said. I have a 16-year-old son. I have Kel. I live in a trailer. I live in a trailer park. If 600 people on motorcycles... I know, he said. I know exactly what it looks like from where you're standing. I need you to trust me. I don't know you. No, he said. You don't. But you fed me when you had nothing. And that means something about who you are. And I'm asking you to let who you are carry you through the next 24 hours. She pressed her hand over her mouth. She breathed through her nose. She counted. I have to go to work, she said finally. I know. Go to work. Come home. Make sure Noah is with you. Is this safe? On my life, he said without hesitation. She hung up. She stood there. Then she poured the rest of her coffee down the sink because her stomach couldn't handle it, picked up her keys and her apron and drove to the diner. The shift was the longest of her life. She couldn't talk about it. She couldn't tell Darlene. If she told Darlene, Darlene would panic, and the panic would spread, and Garrett would hear it, and Garrett would do something unhelpful. She couldn't tell Mike. She could not under any circumstances tell Garrett. So she worked. She took orders. She refilled coffee. She smiled at a table of elderly women who came in every Thursday for French toast and spent 30 minutes talking about their grandchildren. She gave a little boy who dropped his entire pancake on the floor a new one for free and noted with grim internal humor that she was once again comping food without authorization, and this time she didn't even feel bad about it. At 11:40, Darlene pulled her into the back hallway. Okay, Darlene said, I need to show you something. She held out her phone, Waitress. A Facebook page, not the same post from last night, but a new one. A different page, larger following. The caption read, Tomorrow morning, Arizona. For a woman who fed our brothers when they had nothing. If you know, you know. If you ride, you ride. It had been shared 47,000 times. This is about you, isn't it? Darlene said. It wasn't a question. Evelyn looked at the number, 47,000. Darlene, Evelyn Marie Harris. I have worked next to you for 8 years. You tore up an $82 check for a table of Hell's Angels 2 days ago. Is this about you or isn't it? Evelyn looked at her, looked at the phone, looked back. Yes, she said. Darlene sat down on the stack of supply boxes they used as an informal bench in the hallway. She sat down slowly the way people sit when their knees go a little soft. 650, Evelyn added. He said 650. Darlene said a word that she didn't usually say at work. Before sunrise tomorrow, Evelyn said. Another word, stronger. I need you to not tell Garrett, Evelyn said. Darlene looked up at her. Ev, honey, there is going to be 650 Hell's Angels at your trailer tomorrow morning. Garrett is going to be the least of your problems. I know, Evelyn said, but let me get through today first. Please. Darlene looked at her for a long time. Then she stood up, straightened her apron, and said, You're either the bravest person I've ever met or you've completely lost your mind. Probably both, Evelyn said. They went back to work. The afternoon moved like concrete. Every hour felt like 2. Evelyn's phone buzzed 3 more times with texts from numbers she didn't recognize. 2 journalists, one just a person who said they'd seen the post and wanted to say that she was a good person. She read the last one twice. She didn't know why it hit her the way it did, harder than the journalists, harder than the share counts. Just a stranger saying you are a good person. Marcus used to say that, not constantly, not as a performance, just sometimes out of nowhere when she least expected it. She'd be washing dishes or folding laundry, and he'd look at her from across the room and say it like it was a simple fact, like saying the sky is blue, or water is wet. You're a good person, Ev. She'd always told him to stop being sentimental. She wished she hadn't. She left the diner at 4:30, drove straight home, and found Noah in the kitchen doing exactly what Noah always did: homework, textbook open, pencil moving. He looked up at her and immediately stopped moving his pencil. "What happened?" he said. "Close the book," she said. He closed it. She sat down. She told him everything. The full version: Kel Monroe in the parking lot, the promise on Ray's name, the 650, the Facebook post, the journalist before sunrise. She told it straight, no editorializing, just the facts in order, the way she'd told him things since he was small, because she'd decided early that he deserved the truth. When she finished, Noah was very still. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "Yes." "Here at the trailer." "Yes." He looked at the table. He picked up his pencil and set it down again. "Are you scared?" She thought about lying. She decided not to. "Some," she said, "but he said it would be good. He promised on Ray's name, and in their world, that's everything," Noah said quietly. He'd looked it up. Of course he'd looked it up. He was Noah. "Yeah," she said, "that's everything." They ate dinner quietly. She washed dishes while Noah stood next to her and dried them, something he hadn't done since he was small, when he used to pull a step stool up to the sink and help. She didn't comment on it. She just handed him the plates. After the kitchen was clean, she called her neighbor, Betty Okafor, who was 71 and had lived 3 trailers down for 9 years and was one of the most unflappable people Evelyn had ever known. She kept the explanation simple. There would be motorcycles in the morning, a large number. It wasn't dangerous, but it would be loud and there would be a lot of people, and she wanted Betty to know, so she wasn't frightened. Betty was quiet for a moment. "How many motorcycles?" she asked. "More than 600. Betty said, "Lord have mercy," in a tone that was more reverent than alarm sound. Then she said, "Should I make coffee?" "You don't have to do that, Betty." "I'm going to make coffee," Betty said firmly. "If 600 people are coming to your yard in the morning, somebody needs to be organized." She paused. "I have a big urn from the church." Evelyn pressed her hand to her mouth again. "Betty, don't you start crying on me, Evelyn Harris. Go to bed. I'll handle the coffee." She did start crying, just a little. She turned away from Noah so he wouldn't see. She went to bed at 10. She lay in the dark. She thought about her grandmother, about Marcus, about a check torn into quarters lying on a table in the corner booth. She thought about a man named Ray Dalton, who had once given a cold stranger the shirt off his back. She thought everything connects to everything. She was almost asleep when her phone screen lit the ceiling. "Kel Monroe," she answered. "Just wanted to check on you," he said. His voice was low. Road quiet. "I'm in bed," she said, "trying to sleep." "Good, that's good." A pause. Engine sounds in the distance. He was riding or near someone who was. "Evelyn, I want to tell you something about Ray. Something you should know before tomorrow." She turned on her side phone to her ear. "Okay." "Ray grew up without much," Kel said. "Not poor the way people say, poor meaning inconvenienced. Poor the way you know poor. Lights off shoes, too small. The kind of hungry that isn't just before dinner. His mother worked 2 jobs and sometimes 3, and she did everything she could, and it still wasn't enough." He paused. "There was a woman in his town when he was 9 years old. She worked at a lunch counter, and one day Ray came in with his friends, and they pooled their money, and they were 70 cents short, and she waved it off. Told him to sit down, eat." Evelyn was very still. "He talked about that woman his whole life," Kel said. "Whole life," said she didn't know what she did for him that day. Said it was the first time a stranger was kind to him, and he never forgot it. His voice was rougher now. "When Bear called me Tuesday night and told me what happened at your diner, I couldn't breathe for a minute." "Kel, you weren't just being kind," he said. "You were being her. You were being the woman who changed Ray Dalton's whole understanding of the world when he was 9 years old." He stopped. When he came back, his voice was collected again, but only just. "So no, it was never about $82. You understand that now?" The ceiling of her dark bedroom blurred. "Yeah," she said softly. "I understand." "Get some sleep," he said. "You too," she said. The call ended. She lay in the dark, and she thought about a 9-year-old boy in a lunch counter, 70 cents short, and a woman who waved it off. She thought about how that woman probably never knew. Went home that same night, same worries, same math on the same legal pad, same hole in the same checking account. Never knew she had given a child the thing that would define him for the rest of his life. How many times Evelyn thought, had she done something small and not known? How many times had anyone? She closed her eyes. Somewhere out there on every highway that fed into Arizona, engines turned in the dark. Men she would never have known riding toward a woman they'd never met to honor a debt that had started before any of them were born, a chain of small kindnesses linking woman to boy to man to these roads, these miles this morning that was coming, whether she was ready for it or not. She slept. And when the first gray light of pre-dawn came through her window before her alarm before Noah stirred, she heard it. Faint at first. So faint she thought she was dreaming. Then louder and louder and louder still. A sound she had never heard in her life, not like this. Not from this many, not all at once. Not aimed at her, not for her, not because of a check torn in quarters and 2 words spoken across a corner booth. The ground beneath the trailer began to tremble. The windows began to rattle in their frames. Evelyn Harris sat up in bed, and in the pre-dawn dark, her hands were absolutely still. She didn't move for a full 30 seconds. She just sat there, in the dark hands flat on the mattress, feeling the vibration come up through the frame of the trailer, the way you feel thunder before you hear it in the chest, in the teeth, in the space behind the eyes. The sound was enormous, and it was getting bigger in some primitive part of her brain that had nothing to do with reason or faith or Kel Monroe's promise fired off a single urgent signal run. She didn't run. She heard Noah's door open, his footsteps in the hall, quick, not panicked, but fast. He pushed her door open. "Mom!" "I hear it," she said. "What do we do?" She looked at her son standing in the doorway in his sleep shirt, his father's eyes wide and alert, and she made a decision in the space of a single breath. She was not going to let him see her fall apart. Whatever was happening outside, whatever was coming, she was going to meet it on her feet. "Get dressed," she said. "Come with me." She was already moving. She pulled on jeans, a sweatshirt, her worn sneakers. She heard Noah doing the same across the hall, fast, efficient, no questions. Good kid. The best kid she had ever known, which was not a thing she said often enough. She went to the kitchen. She could feel the rumbling in the floor through her shoes now. Through the window over the sink, the sky was the pale gray of very early morning, not quite dark, not quite light, and she could see headlights. Not one pair, not 10. A line of light that went further than she could track from where she stood, curving around the trailer park entrance, filling the street, spilling into the lots. Her neighbor Betty's kitchen light came on. Then the trailer on the other side, then another. Her phone rang. She grabbed it. Kel Monroe. "We're here," he said simply. "I can see that," she said, and her voice was steadier than she had any right to expect. "How many people are awake in this park right now because of us?" "Probably all of them," he admitted. "I'm sorry about that. We tried to come in slow. Didn't work as well as I hoped." "Slow," she said. "Kel, the ground is shaking." "Yeah." A pause that might have contained the ghost of a smile. "Come outside, Evelyn, please." "Are you asking or telling?" "I'm asking," he said. "Always asking with you." She hung up. Noah was behind her, dressed, shoes on face, carrying the same expression she imagined she was wearing. Not quite fear, not quite courage, something in the complicated territory between the two. "Ready?" she said. "No," he said honestly. "Me either," she said. "Let's go." She pushed the front door open and stepped outside barefoot because she had forgotten to change into actual shoes, and she was not going back now. What she saw stopped her at the edge of the step. The street was full. Every direction she could see was full. 651 motorcycles, and the number had moved since Kel's last count. She would find out later it was closer to 680, arranged in a mass that stretched from her front door out to the park entrance and beyond. Riders sitting still, engines cut. Now the sudden silence after the roar, as startling as the roar itself had been. Just the ticking of cooling engines and 680 men sitting quietly in the pre-dawn gray, looking at her. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Evelyn stood on her step in her sweatshirt and her sneakers and no socks, and she did the only thing she could do. She looked back. Betty Okafor came out of her trailer with the church coffee urn on a wheeled cart, moving with the calm of a woman who had decided that organization was the proper response to the extraordinary and the sight of tiny 71-year-old Betty in her house robe pushing a coffee urn towards 680 Hell's Angels was so specific and so perfectly Betty that something broke open in Evelyn's chest that wasn't grief and wasn't fear and wasn't quite joy either. It was all of it at once. Kel Monroe stepped through the crowd. He walked the same way he'd sat in the booth, purposeful, unhurried, the walk of a man who had never once in his life moved faster than he intended to. He stopped in front of her step. He was holding his helmet in both hands. "Evelyn Harris," he said. "Kel Monroe," she said. He looked up at her. She had the step's small height advantage, and he let her have it, which told her something about him. "On behalf of every man and woman here," he stopped, corrected himself. "There are 12 women in the group. I want that on record." Despite everything, despite the enormity of the moment pressing on her from all sides, she almost smiled. "Noted," she said. "On behalf of every person here," he said, "we are not here to frighten you. We are not here to make demands. We are here because 6 days ago you did something for 6 of our brothers at the lowest moment they'd had in a long time. And in our world, in the world that Ray Dalton lived in and breathed in and believed in, that kind of thing does not go unanswered." She heard Noah behind her shift his weight. She heard Betty's coffee urn wheels on the pavement. "I already told you it was just breakfast," she said. "And I already told you it was never just breakfast." Kel reached into his jacket. He pulled out an envelope, plain white, thick with contents, and held it out to her. "This is from the collection we took among ourselves. Voluntary. Every dollar in there was given because someone wanted to give it." She looked at the envelope. She didn't take it yet. "How much?" he told her. She heard Noah breathe in sharply behind her. She heard it because she was doing the same thing. "Kel," she started. "Evelyn." His voice was firm and quiet. "Let us do this. Let Ray's name mean something today. Please." She reached out and took the envelope. Her hand was shaking, and she didn't try to hide it. "There's more," Kel said. "More," she repeated like the word was in a language she was still learning. He turned slightly and made a gesture. From the mass of riders, 4 men came forward. She recognized Bear, the heavy-set man from the booth, the one who had turned his wallet inside out. He looked different now. He stood straighter. His face had color in it that it hadn't had 2 days ago in the corner booth when grief had pressed him flat. Bear was carrying a toolbox, not a small one. A real one, the kind that cost real money, full and heavy, that he was carrying one-handed like it weighed nothing. The man behind him was carrying a box of hardware. She could see coils of wire, outlet covers, electrical supplies. The next man had lumber 2x4s across his shoulder. The last had a bag of roofing materials she could identify by sight because the back corner of her trailer had needed work for a year, and she'd priced it out and put it off and priced it out again. She put her hand over her mouth. "You can't," she started. "We're tradesmen," the Bear said. His voice was a low rumble, gentle, the way big men's voices sometimes get when they're being careful. "Between us, we've got 4 electricians, 2 plumbers, a roofer, 3 carpenters, and a guy who claims to be a structural engineer, although we're still taking a vote on whether to believe him." A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd, real laughter, easy and warm. She felt it change the air. "We're going to fix your car," Kel said. "We've got a mechanic, the best one I know. Whatever that noise is, he'll find it." He paused. "And there's one more thing." She had started crying without deciding to. She could feel it, the slow, specific burn along her lower lids, and she pressed the envelope against her chest and breathed. "Noah Harris," Kel said. Behind her, Noah went very still. Kel looked on past her to where Noah stood. "Kel Monroe, I've heard about you from your mother without her knowing she was telling me." "She said I was exceptional," Noah said. His voice came out careful and young in a way that he usually managed to hide. "She didn't have to say anything," Kel said. "A woman who works that hard for her kid, who tears up her own money for strangers while her electric bill is past due, that woman has a reason." "You're the reason." A sound came from Noah that Evelyn had not heard from him in 4 years. Not since the week after Marcus died. She did not turn around. She gave him that. "Ray Dalton had a foundation," Kel said. "Small one. He set it up 5 years ago for kids who needed a shot they weren't going to get otherwise. He funded it himself for the first 2 years. Then the rest of us started contributing. It's not huge, but it's real and it's funded. And as of yesterday morning, Noah Harris is its first name scholarship recipient. The silence was total. Evelyn turned around then. She had to. She turned and looked at her son, who was standing with both hands pressed to his face, the way you press when you're trying to hold something in that is too big to hold. And she crossed the step in one stride and put her arms around him the way she hadn't been able to when he'd started making his own lunch to save her trouble, and when his teacher had said exceptional, and she'd cried in the parking lot all those moments she'd absorbed alone so he wouldn't see the weight. She let it out now, both of them together in front of 680 strangers who had the grace to look away. Bear cleared his throat, loudly, on purpose. She laughed. Through everything she laughed. She pulled back from Noah and pressed her hand to his face once and turned back around. Betty Okafor had begun distributing coffee. She was working with the systematic efficiency of a woman who had run church hospitality for 30 years. Several of the riders had gotten off their bikes to help her. A man with a 3-foot beard and a scar across his chin was carefully pouring into paper cups, while Betty directed him like a very small, very authoritative general. "She does not need any help," Evelyn said to Kel. "She made that extremely clear." Kel agreed. "The big guy with the beard is doing exactly what she tells him." Something shifted in the moment then. The enormity of it had been almost unbearable, the weight of the gesture, the impossible scale of it, the emotion pressing from all directions. And then Betty and the beard and the coffee cups arrived, and the moment became something more human, more manageable, not smaller, just real in a different way. The way grief eventually becomes real and livable, not because it lessens, but because life keeps moving through it. Kel reached into his jacket again. He pulled out a card. "This is the foundation contact. The scholarship information, the amount, the terms, it's all in there. Noah can apply to any four-year university. The funds transfer directly to the institution." He held it out. She took it. She looked at it. She looked at the name printed at the top. The Ray Dalton Educational Foundation. "He would have liked Noah," Kel said. "Without knowing him, he just would have. He had a sense for good people." "How do you know Noah's good people?" she said. "You've never met him." Kel smiled then, a real one, the first full one she'd seen from him, and it changed his face considerably. "He's yours," he said simply. "That tells me everything I need to know." She looked down at the card. She looked at the envelope still pressed against her chest. She looked at Bear and the other men with their tools and supplies waiting with a patience that surprised her. She had expected something louder, something more performative. This was quiet. This was respectful. This was, she realized, the specific manner of people who understood grief and understood debt and understood that both things required a certain stillness. "I don't know how to say thank you for this," she said. "I've been trying to find the words since I came outside and I don't have them." "You don't need them," Kel said. "You said the ones that mattered on Tuesday morning. I just tore up a check." "You look at 6 men in the worst day of their lives in the face," he said. "And you said nobody leaves here hungry. That's not a small thing, Evelyn. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you it's a small thing." She pressed her lips together, nodded once, and then from somewhere in the middle of the crowd, a single engine started. Not aggressive, almost gentle. A signal. Another joined it, then another. The sound built gradually the way a choir builds voice by voice until it was full and complete, and you could feel it in your sternum. Not the terrifying roar of arrival. Something different. A chord. An acknowledgement. And then one by one in a sequence that moved through the crowd like a wave, the riders raised a hand. Just one hand lifted held. 680 people raising their right hand toward a 54-year-old waitress standing on her trailer step in sneakers with no socks. She'd been holding it together reasonably well until that moment. She stopped holding it together. Noah's arm came around her shoulders from behind, and she let it the way she hadn't let anything in a long time. And she stood in the pre-dawn Arizona morning, and she cried properly, deeply, the kind of crying that isn't sadness exactly, but is the release of every held breath and every absorbed blow and every 3 a.m. arithmetic session and every time she'd said fine when she meant anything but. A woman's voice from somewhere in the crowd, clear and strong. "We see you, Evelyn." Another voice. "We see you." And then it was coming from multiple places, not scripted, not rehearsed, She could tell by the way it overlapped and stumbled, and Rose just people saying a true thing in the way that true things sometimes need to be said out loud by many voices before they land. We see you. Kel Monroe was looking at something past her shoulder. She followed his gaze. The neighbors had come out. All of them, every trailer in the park, lights on people standing in their doorways, in the lots between their homes. Old men and young mothers and kids. In pajamas. The man 2 spots down, who had never once waved at her in 7 years, was standing in his doorway with his hand over his heart. Betty Okafor had stopped distributing coffee. She was standing with the empty urn on the cart and her hand pressed to her cheek, and she was not, for the first time in Evelyn's 9 years of knowing her, pretending to be unflappable. "Kelta," Evelyn said. Her voice was wrecked, and she didn't try to fix it. "That story you told me last night, about Ray, about the woman in the lunch counter." "Yeah," he said, "I need you to hear something." He looked at her, fully directly the way he always did. "I don't know what I did for him," she said. "I don't know what that woman did for me, Boa. I've had my own people who showed up when they didn't have to, who gave what they couldn't afford to give, who treated me like I was real when I felt invisible. I don't know who they are now. I don't know if they know, but it's a chain." She pressed the foundation card against the envelope, both of them against her chest. "It's all one chain. Ray's part of it. Your part of it. My grandmother. That woman in the lunch counter. All of it, one thing." Kel was quiet for a moment. Then he said very quietly, "Yeah, that's exactly it." "So this is not a ending," she said. "No," he said. "This is a middle." "Yes," he said. "That's exactly what this is." Bear cleared his throat again, his signature sound she was learning. "Okay, so," he said, directing this to Kel with the energy of a man who was deeply uncomfortable with extended emotion and had reached his capacity. "Do we start on the roof or the car first?" Kel looked at Evelyn. "Your call." She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. She straightened. She looked at Bear, this huge, grieving, tender man who had turned his wallet inside out on a table 2 days ago and was standing in her lot with a toolbox like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Car," she said. "It makes a noise that's been worrying me for 3 weeks." "What kind of noise?" "Sorry," Bear asked. "A bad one," she said. Bear nodded like this was a complete and sufficient answer. "I'll get Terrence. He'll have it figured out in 10 minutes. He started moving, toolbox swinging. Then he stopped and turned back. "Mrs. Harris, for what it's worth." He stopped again. He was not, she suspected, a man who said the inner thing easily. He looked at the ground for a moment, then back up. "You served us that morning the way Ray's mother used to serve people. Tired and short on money, and you did it anyway because it was right. That's the whole of it." She held his gaze. "Thank you, Bear." "Don't thank me," he said gruffly. "I'm fixing your car. That's the selfish part. This is the part where I get to do something useful instead of standing around feeling terrible." He turned and moved into the crowd, and she heard him calling for Terrence with the efficiency of a man who needed a task more than he needed to stand still. Noah appeared at her elbow. He had his face back together. Mostly. There was still something loose around his eyes. "Mom," he said. "Yeah. I'm going to college." She looked at him, at this boy who was his father's eyes and her grandmother's heart and a thing entirely his own. "Yeah," she said, "you are." The sun came up. Not gradually. The way the Arizona sun came up was never gradual. It was sudden and total. The world dark and then the world blazing, no half measures. Light hit the lot and the street and 680 people, and Evelyn Harris standing in front of her trailer with an envelope and a foundation card, and her son beside her, and coffee being distributed by Betty Okafor, who had found the second urn. And somewhere under her car, a mechanic named Terrence had already found the noise. "Loose heat shield," he called out. 10-minute fix. You've been driving with this for 3 weeks. "About that," she called back. "Lady," he said, and there was equal parts horror and affection in it. She laughed. The laugh surprised her, big and real and sudden. Noah laughed too, then Bear laughed from somewhere in the crowd, and then it was moving through the people again, the way things moved through them organically, genuinely, one person at a time. Kel Monroe stood next to her in the growing light arms, folded, watching his people work and move and drink Betty's coffee, and he did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, "He would have loved this." "Ray?" "Yeah," a pause. "He was an embarrassing amount of fun at gatherings, but he would have been making everyone laugh by now. Would have been out there helping Betty operate that coffee urn and calling it a tactical operation." She smiled. "Tell me about him." And Kel Monroe, who was not a man who typically told the inner thing easily, started talking. He talked about Ray Dalton, the man who had grown up poor and become generous in direct proportion to what he'd lacked, who had believed that the point of having anything was to use it for someone who had nothing, who had laughed the loudest and ridden the hardest and given the most, and who had died the way he'd lived, which was fully and without reservation. He talked for 15 minutes while Terrence fixed the heat shield and Bear organized the roofing materials, and Betty ran a coffee operation with military precision, and Noah sat on the trailer step, listening with the focused attention he gave to everything that mattered. And Evelyn listened. She listened the way she'd always been able to listen, fully presently, with her whole attention. Her grandmother had told her once that the greatest gift you could give anyone was to hear them completely. She gave it to Kel Monroe now, this road-worn man with gray at his temples, who was missing his friend in the specific raw way of fresh grief, and she let his words about Ray Dalton sit in the space between them and become real. When he finished, they were both quiet for a moment. Then Evelyn said, "He sounds like someone my grandmother would have approved of enormously." Kel smiled. "Highest praise I've heard all week," he said. The motorcycles were gone by noon. Not all at once, they left in waves the way they'd come, small groups peeling off through the morning as the work got done. Terrence finished the car in under 20 minutes and then moved to the electrical problem that had been making Evelyn's kitchen outlet spark for 6 months. The roofers found 3 soft spots along the back corner that she'd known about and 2 she hadn't. Bear worked the trailer's broken front step with the focused silence of a man who needed his hands busy more than he needed conversation, and when he finished, he stood up and tested it 3 times, jumped on it actually with his full weight, and nodded with a satisfaction that was entirely personal. By 10 o'clock, the work was done. By 11, the crowd had thinned to a few dozen. Betty's second coffee urn was empty. The man from 2 spots down, who had never waved, had brought out a folding table and a box of store-bought cookies without being asked, and nobody remarked on it, which was the right thing to do. Noah had spent the morning moving through the crowd with a careful, quiet attention that reminded Evelyn of the way he studied things, not passively, but actively storing details, asking occasional questions, listening to the answers completely. She had watched him talk to Bear for 20 minutes. She couldn't hear what they said, but at the end of it, Bear had put his hand briefly on Noah's shoulder, and Noah had stood a little straighter, and that was enough. When Kel Monroe said goodbye, he did it simply. No speeches. He shook her hand, both of his around one of hers, firm and brief, and looked at her directly the way he always did. "You have my number," he said. "I have your number," she confirmed. "Use it if you need anything. Not for money, we've handled that. For anything else. You run into something you can't solve, you call." "Kel," she looked at him. "You have a life. You have people. You can't be on call for a waitress in Arizona." "I'm not on call for a waitress in Arizona," he said. "I'm available to Evelyn Harris." "That's different, Edna." He let go of her hand. "Ray would have said the same thing. Actually, Ray would have already been here twice more and brought a casserole." "I would have liked him," she said. "Yeah," Kel said. "You would have." He put on his helmet. He rode away. She watched until she couldn't see him anymore, and then she stood in the lot for a long moment with the envelope in her apron pocket and the foundation card in her hand, and the sound of Terrence's handiwork humming in her repaired car, and she breathed, just breathed. Then she went inside and called her landlord. Not the property management company. She had a number for the actual owner, Dennis Pruitt, a 68-year-old man she'd spoken to twice in 7 years. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Mr. Pruitt," she said, "this is Evelyn Harris, lot 14. "Mrs. Harris," a cautious pause. "I heard my manager mention that there was some sort of gathering at the property this morning." "Yes," she said. "I want to apologize for the disruption to the other residents. I'll be going door to door this afternoon to do that personally." A pause. Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine," she said, and she meant it, which still surprised her. "Mr. Pruitt, I'm calling to pay the overdue rent. and the next 3 months in advance if you'll accept it. Silence. Then Dennis Pruitt said in a very different voice than the cautious one, Mrs. Harris, I've been renting to people for 30 years. I've never had a tenant pay 3 months in advance. First time for everything, she said. When she hung up, her hands were shaking again, but it was a different kind of shaking than it had been for the past 3 days. Not the cold trembling of fear and arithmetic. Something warm this time. The shaking of a person whose nervous system hadn't quite caught up to the fact that the emergency was over. Noah found her at the kitchen table 10 minutes later, legal pad in front of her. The column of numbers, the one she'd been staring at for weeks, the one that never added up right, had a line drawn through it. She was writing a new column. Different numbers, numbers that added in her favor. He sat across from her. He didn't say anything. He just sat. After a while, he said, "What does it feel like?" She looked up. What does what feel like? Not having to be scared about money for a minute. She considered the question seriously the way it deserved. Strange, she said, like when you've been holding something heavy for so long that when you put it down, your arms still feel like they're holding it. He nodded. He understood that. She could see that he understood it, that it wasn't abstract to him, and that landed in her chest with a specific ache because he was 16 and he should not have understood it so completely. Noah, she said, I want to say something to you. He looked at her. You have spent the last 4 years watching me struggle and pretending you didn't notice, so I wouldn't feel worse about it. You've made your own lunches. You've managed your own school things. You've never once asked me for what I couldn't give. She stopped. I need you to know that I see that, and I need you to know that none of it, none of the struggle, none of the debt, none of the 3 a.m. math was your fault. Not 1 cent of it. His jaw tightened. Mom, let me finish, she said, because I also need you to know that you are the reason I got up every single morning. Not the bills, not the mom, you. And every sacrifice it was nothing. It was easy. Because you are worth every hard thing I have ever done and everything I will ever do. She pressed her hand flat on the table. You are going to college. You are going to use that mind the way it was meant to be used. And you are never, not once, going to let someone tell you that where you came from limits where you can go. You understand me? Noah's face did the thing again, the losing of composure that he'd been fighting all morning. He pressed his knuckles to his mouth briefly. I understand you, he said. Good. She pulled the legal pad towards her. Now help me figure out what to do about the electric bill. He laughed, wet around the edges but real. Mom, you literally just paid 3 months of rent in advance. Old habits, she said. He reached across and pulled the legal pad away from her. I've got it, he said. Go call Darlene. She's probably losing her mind. She was. Darlene answered on the first ring with an urgent, breathless, Evelyn? Marie Harris, I need a full report right now. I have been sitting here for 4 hours with my phone in my hand. Evelyn told her, all of it. The envelope, the toolbox, the foundation bear, and the coffee step, Betty, and the tactical coffee operation, Kelman Rose, goodbye. She sat on the couch and talked for 30 minutes while Noah sat at the table with the legal pad writing down numbers in the careful, organized hand he'd gotten from Marcus. And outside, the Arizona afternoon was heating up the way it always did, the specific baking weight of it, familiar and constant. Darlene was quiet for a long time after Evelyn finished. Say something, Evelyn said. I'm trying to find a sentence, Darlene said. Give me a minute. Another pause. Okay, here's what I've got. I have worked at that diner for 12 years. I have watched that man dock your pay and talk down to you and treat you like you were lucky to be there. And you, in one moment, in one decision made without any expectation of reward, set off something that man couldn't create in his entire life if he tried. Her voice was thick. I think there's something important in that, Ev. I wasn't trying to prove anything to Garrett, Evelyn said. I know you weren't. That's exactly the point. A pause. Are you coming in tomorrow? She hadn't thought about it. She sat with the question for a moment. Tomorrow was Friday. She was scheduled 6 to 3. Yeah, she said, I'll be in. Same diner, same apron, same terrible coffee machine that Mike keeps jury rigging instead of replacing. Same everything, Evelyn agreed. Except not the same, Darlene said quietly. You know that, right? Nothing's actually the same. She thought about the envelope in her apron pocket, the foundation card on the counter, the fixed step, the repaired roof, the car that no longer made its 3-week noise. She thought about Noah at the kitchen table with the legal pad running numbers that finally went in the right direction. Yeah, she said, I know. She went to bed early that night. She set her alarm. She lay in the dark, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she did not run numbers. She did not calculate. She did not lie when at the ceiling, doing the math of survival in the small hours. She slept, deeply, cleanly, the sleep of someone who had been carrying a weight for so long that its absence felt like floating. She woke up before the alarm, but not in the anxious way. She lay there in the quiet for a few minutes, fully awake, listening to the stillness of the trailer and the early morning sounds outside, and the specific quality of the dark that said 5 o'clock, not midnight, not 3 a.m., just a regular morning with a full day ahead. She got up. She made coffee. Real coffee she'd splurged on a bag of the good kind at the gas station on the way home yesterday, a small luxury so automatic for most people that it wasn't even a decision, and for her had been a meaningful act of choosing herself for once. She was at the counter, mug in hand, when she heard Noah's door open. He came into the kitchen, dressed already. He stopped when he saw her. You're smiling, he said. She hadn't realized she was. Apparently. Looks right on you, he said. You should do it more. She handed him the coffee she'd poured for him. He took it. They stood at the counter together in the early morning quiet, the way they sometimes did, the way she hoped they would keep doing long after he was grown and gone and building his own life in whatever direction that fine mind of his pointed him. I have something I need to tell you, Noah said. She looked at him. He set his mug down. He picked it up again. He was working himself up to something. Last night after you went to bed, I checked the Facebook post. The original one. It has 112,000 shares now. She processed that. And there's a news van outside, he added. Noah. 2, actually. He had the expression of someone delivering information that he knows is going to cause a reaction and is bracing for it. And a woman called the house phone. Yeah, we still have a house phone. I know, she said she was from the Today Show. Evelyn set down her mug. The Today Show, she said. She left a number. He slid a piece of paper across the counter. She looked at it. She did not pick it up. Mom, Noah said carefully, I know you don't want to be a story. You said that. I understand that. But I've been thinking about it. He paused. What if being the story this once was part of the chain? She looked at him. You told me it's all one chain, he said. Ray's mother, the woman in the lunch counter, Grandma Ida, you. What if the next link is someone watching this on television who's having the worst morning of their life and needs to hear that somebody chose kindness over fear? What if that's the next link? She stood very still. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do, he said. I'm just saying, maybe this isn't about you anymore. Maybe it was never just about you. She looked at her son. 16 years old with his father's eyes and her grandmother's heart and a mind that could build arguments like scaffolding, clean and load-bearing, and exact. She thought about a 9-year-old Ray Dalton in a lunch counter 70 cents short and a woman who never knew what she'd started. She thought about all the people who had shared that post, 112,000 of them now, and what they had seen in it, what they had needed from it, what small failing flame it had caught and held. She picked up the piece of paper. She walked to the front door. She opened it. She looked at the 2 news vans parked respectfully at the edge of the lot, no one pushing, no one approaching, waiting. She called the number on the paper. She said, My name is Evelyn Harris. I'm told you'd like to speak with me. The Today Show producer's voice was warm and professional and carefully not too eager. Mrs. Harris, thank you so much for calling. We'd love to have you on if you're willing. Your story has, I don't know how to say this without sounding like a pitch. It's moved a lot of people, a very large number of people. 112,000 shares, Evelyn said. It's of about 20 minutes ago. It's closer to 170,000, the producer said carefully. And it's still moving. She absorbed that. 170,000 people. She thought about what Darlene had said. I have watched that man treat you like you were lucky to be there. And she thought about every version of herself that had stood in that diner feeling invisible. Every woman like her who felt invisible. Every person running impossible arithmetic in the middle of the night and alone saying fine when they meant anything but. Okay, she said, I'll do it, but I have conditions. A brief surprised pause. Of course, what conditions? I'm not a hero, she said. I'm a person who did a regular thing. I need that to be the story. Not a miracle, not an exception. Just a person doing what people ought to do for each other. She paused, and I want to talk about Ray Dalton. He's the reason this mattered the way it did. He doesn't get left out. Absolutely, the producer said. All of that, absolutely. One more thing, she said. My son's name stays out of it. Understood. She hung up. She turned around. Noah was leaning in the doorway with his coffee mug and an expression she hadn't seen before, something like pride aimed at her, which felt enormous and slightly overwhelming. Good conditions, he said. I've been practicing being direct, she said. You might have noticed. He smiled. I've noticed. She went to work. She put on her apron. She tied it in the back the way she had for 11 years. She refilled the salt shakers. She started the coffee. She worked her tables and said good morning to her customers and moved through the diner the way she always had, efficiently, quietly, without fanfare. At 9:15, Garrett called her into the office. She sat down across from him this time. She had not done that before. He looked at her. She looked at him. Something in his face read the change in her before he had words for it. I've been getting calls, he said. Media inquiries about an incident earlier this week. I know, she said. The diner is being named in some of the coverage. I know, she said again. He shifted in his chair. I want you to understand that the situation with your pay, you are going to reverse the deduction, she said. He blinked. I was going to say Garrett. Her voice was even. No heat, no apology, no performance. Just the flat, dry weight of a fact. You're going to reverse the deduction because you're a businessman who is currently being named in national news coverage as the manager who docked the pay of a woman who fed grieving men out of her own wages. You're going to reverse it today, and you're not going to make a thing out of it. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. The deduction will be reversed on your next check, he said. Thank you, she said. She stood up. I have tables. She walked out. Darlene was in the hallway. Her face was one large, uncontrolled expression of pure joy. I felt that from out here, she whispered. Mind your tables, Evelyn said serenely. Darlene made a sound like she was trying not to cheer in a library. The week passed the way weeks passed, with the small and relentless machinery of ordinary days. Evelyn worked her shifts. She taped the Today Show segment on a Thursday morning in a satellite studio in Phoenix, wearing a blue blouse she'd bought at the thrift store the weekend before because Noah had insisted she have something new, and she had let herself be persuaded. She said what she'd said she would say. She talked about Ray Dalton. She talked about her grandmother. She said it was not a miracle and not a headline. It was just a person doing what people could do for each other if they decided to. The clip got 4 million views in 48 hours. Carla Torres from the Arizona Daily Independent wrote a piece that Evelyn had reluctantly agreed to, a long one, careful and honest, that talked about the bills and the $17 and the electric company and the arithmetic of survival. Evelyn had been afraid of that part, being seen that clearly, being that known. But she had told Noah she would be honest about the whole of it, and she kept that promise. The response to that article was the thing that undid her completely. Not the big gesture, not the motorcycles or the envelope or the scholarship. It was the emails, hundreds of them, then thousands. From women who worked double shifts and did impossible math. From men who had turned wallets inside out in booths. From people who had been the ones needing the check torn up. And from people who had been the ones tearing it. And from people who had never done either, but who read the story at 6 in the morning before their own shift and felt something rearrange in them, some recalibration toward the possible. She read as many as she could. She answered what she could answer. She started using the phrase her grandmother had used because it was the truest thing she knew, and she found she was saying it more and more to more and more people. Don't let anyone leave hungry if you can help it. 3 weeks after the morning the motorcycles came, she got a text from Kel Monroe, just 2 lines. Thought you should know. We dedicated this year's ride to Ray. We added a new tradition. Every stop, every diner we pay for someone's meal, anonymously. Call it the Ray Dalton Forward. She read it twice, then she typed back, That's exactly right. That's exactly what it should be. His response came immediately. Figured you'd say that. She set the phone down on the counter. She looked at the kitchen. At the table where she and Noah ate dinner, where she had spread out bills and done impossible math, where her son had pushed the legal pad away from her and said, I've got it. At the window over the sink, where the curtain she'd been meaning to replace for 2 years was still there, still slightly crooked, and she found she didn't want to replace it anymore. It was part of the story now. The whole kitchen was. Everything was part of the story. The worn apron on the hook by the door, the coffee mug Marcus had given her, the step that Bear had fixed solid now under her feet every time she walked out and every time she came home. She thought about the moment, the exact moment, the one that started all of it, standing at the corner booth with the check in her hand. The fraction of a second between the thought and the action. The world she lived in before the tear and the world she lived in after it. How thin that line was. How entirely her own the choice had been. Nobody had made her. Nothing had guaranteed any outcome. She had done it with $17 in the bank and an electric bill under the fruit bowl, and the shaking hands of a woman who was tired in every layer, and she had done it because her grandmother's voice was in her bones, and because Marcus had always said she was a good person, and because 6 men were sitting in a booth with the specific hollow eyes of grief, and she knew what that looked like, and she could not walk away from it. That was the whole of it. That was enough. She picked up her apron. She put it on. She tied it in the back. And Evelyn Harris, waitress, widow, mother, daughter link, in a chain longer and stronger than she would ever fully see, went back to work.